Deep in the heart of America, beyond endless fields of wheat and winding prairie trails, lie stories that have been whispered for generations. Hidden beneath the quiet Kansas landscape are secrets of gold, outlaw loot, and vanished fortunes that still stir the imagination. From the spoils of frontier bandits buried on the run, to mysterious caches left behind by homesteaders who never returned, the Sunflower State holds more lost treasure legends than you might suppose. These are the lost treasure stories of Kansas. The scant surviving records of Joseph R. de Prefontaine offer no indication that he might have been involved in a brutal robbery and murder, an event that led to the disappearance of $12,000 in gold and silver near Lyons, Kansas. Yet, few doubt that much of this treasure remains hidden. Verified by early traders along the Santa Fe Trail, the lost fortune has been sought for over 130 years, but it continues to elude even the most determined treasure hunters. Most past searches have been concentrated near the Arkansas and Little Arkansas rivers, close to Lyons. However, extensive research suggests that the hoard was actually hidden along Cow Creek. When it vanished in 1843, it comprised $10,000 in gold coins and $2,000 in silver. With gold now valued at around $165 per ounce, the treasure's worth has multiplied many times over. More significantly, its historical value renders it virtually priceless. If it were ever unearthed, Joseph R. de Prefontaine would likely groan in his forgotten grave, for it is doubtful he ever spent a single coin of it. He narrowly escaped execution by hanging, spared only by a presidential pardon. Westport, Missouri served as a major departure point for the Santa Fe Trail. Merchants there were shocked to learn that de Prefontaine had taken part in one of the most notorious robberies on the trail, as their records depicted him as a family man. Logbooks revealed that over the course of a year, he had purchased a pair of men's shoes, a pair of women's shoes, 2 pairs of boots, and 6 pairs of children's shoes. De Prefontaine first appeared in historical records around 1836, arriving in St. Louis on his way west. He quickly found work and stayed in the city for several years, earning a living. However, he was always driven by the dream of striking it rich in gold. He eventually secured a position as the manager of a theater, a job that could have provided him with a stable life, had it not been for the presence of a saloon within the establishment. In addition to fathering children, drinking seemed to be de Prefontaine's favorite pastime. The theater attracted St. Louis's more refined citizens who attended lectures, operas, and Shakespearean plays in pursuit of culture. However, de Prefontaine found such performances utterly tedious. Night after night, as the theater filled, he would retreat to the saloon, reveling in the rowdy company of frontier men and weary husbands who sought escape while their wives absorbed the arts. His downfall in St. Louis came on the opening night of Hamlet. With the theater packed and the saloon bustling with intoxicated patrons, de Prefontaine, emboldened by liquor, decided to put on a performance of his own. Climbing onto a table, he began loudly reciting Shakespearean lines, mixing them with jabs at St. Louis's cultural pretensions. The drunken crowd cheered and applauded, creating such a racket that the actual play had to be stopped. The actors' voices were drowned out by de Prefontaine's impromptu rendition of Hamlet. A group of stern-faced men marched from the theater into the saloon, just as de Prefontaine was reaching a dramatic peak. Without a word, they seized him by the collar and tossed him into the dirt street outside. "Don't set foot in there again," they warned. "If you do, we'll blow the top of your head off." With that, they returned to their seats, and the show resumed. De Prefontaine, bruised and disheveled, picked himself up and staggered home to his wife and well-shod children. When he sobered up, he realized he had been fired and disgraced. It hardly troubled him. In his mind, this was the perfect moment to head west, where he was convinced his fortune in gold awaited. He wondered why he had even lingered in St. Louis when the real frontier began just beyond the Missouri River. Westport was a bustling hub for wagon trains embarking on the journey to Santa Fe. The town thrived on trade, its streets lined with wagon factories and stores selling supplies for westward-bound travelers. De Prefontaine was immediately captivated by the town's energy. He felt a thrill watching traders struggle to unload heavy kegs from their wagons, for he quickly learned that many of these kegs were filled with gold returning from Santa Fe. One day, he vowed, he would have his share of that fortune. He soon became a regular at Daniel Yoakum's two-story log tavern, a favored gathering place for traders and teamsters. Here, he spent long afternoons and late nights, listening for opportunities to join a westbound wagon train. The tavern was the perfect place to make connections. Conversations revolved around the latest caravan movements, the amount of gold each train carried, and the number of men guarding it. Westport's economy revolved around freighting, and De Prefontaine never tired of hearing freighters recount their perilous adventures. With each passing day, his hunger for gold grew stronger. On an afternoon in 1843, he was seated at a tavern table, drinking, when a whiskered friend shared news of an unusual caravan that had departed from Santa Fe that February. It was said to be the bravest group ever to cross the plains. For a year, bands of Texans had been scouring the prairies, ambushing Mexican trading expeditions. The Republic of Texas was teetering on the edge of war with Mexico, and raiding these wealthy traders was seen as a badge of honor among the Texans. Despite these dangerous conditions, a Mexican caravan consisting of just 2 wagons had set out eastward from Santa Fe. The caravan belonged to the wealthy and influential Don Antonio Jose Chavez, a member of a powerful Santa Fe family. His father had served as governor in 1823 and his brother in 1835. Accompanying Chavez were 5 servants and 55 mules, some intended for trade along the journey. His plan was to sell any surviving animals in Westport. The wagons carried an astonishing $12,000 in gold and silver, yet there was not a single guard to protect them. Before the night in the tavern was over, De Prefontaine had been drawn into a scheme to relieve Don Antonio Jose Chavez of his fortune. A stranger had approached De Prefontaine and his drinking companion, joining them at the table. His name was Jack McDaniel, and he claimed to hold a captain's commission from Texas, tasked with assembling a force to attack Mexican supply trains, a prelude, he said, to capturing Santa Fe. With him was his son David. However, rather than being official agents of Texas, the pair were more likely common desperados, much like the criminals who frequently gathered at Yakbam's tavern to plot robberies and other crimes. McDaniel proposed that De Prefontaine and his bewhiskered friend join his venture to seize the small Mexican caravan. He promised a rich haul, enough to make them all wealthy. The idea excited De Prefontaine, and by midnight, 15 rough men had been recruited for the deed. Most of the gang were seasoned outlaws, horse thieves, highwaymen, and murderers who preyed on travelers for their gold. Before sunrise, the band rode out of Westport following the Santa Fe Trail to intercept Chavez's treasure-laden wagons. From the beginning, Don Antonio Jose Chavez's journey had been plagued with hardship. 10 days out of Santa Fe, the skies darkened, and a brutal cold wind howled across the plains. Freezing rain and heavy snow followed, biting into the travelers with merciless force. Frostbite and exhaustion soon overcame them, but they pressed on. Then the animals began to falter. With each mile, the bone-chilling wind claimed more mules. Finally, only 5 remained standing. Left with no other choice, Chavez abandoned one of the wagons, carefully transferring its contents to the remaining one. He took extra care to conceal the gold and silver beneath the floorboards, hoping it would be difficult to find. By April 10th, the caravan reached Cow Creek Crossing, west of present-day Lyons, roughly midway between the Arkansas River and the Little Arkansas. They halted there, desperate for rest and shelter, before continuing their journey. The site was a favored resting place for traders. As Chavez surveyed the land, a sense of hope stirred within him. There was ample water, and game was plentiful. They could construct a makeshift shelter beside the wagon and endure the storm with minimal hardship. The dangers seemed minimal, perhaps only a faint risk of encountering a wandering band of Indians. Even that, he thought, was unlikely. Only a fool would be roaming the plains in such dreadful weather. Seated near a fire, Chavez warmed himself as his servants busied themselves unloading kettles and pans. Soon, food would be cooking over the flames. Then, from the corner of his eye, Chavez noticed movement atop a distant rise beyond Cow Creek. His hand instinctively went to his rifle. For several long minutes, he remained still, his gaze fixed on the distant figures. Then, after careful observation, he exhaled in relief and lowered his weapon. The horsemen approaching were not Indians. Their mounts were too well fed, too steady. He reasoned that they must be fellow travelers from Westport, also making their way to Santa Fe. Turning to his servants, he gestured toward the approaching riders. "Look, we have company," he said. "Prepare extra food for our unexpected guests." The servants, reassured by the presence of additional travelers, felt a surge of relief. With more men in camp, they believed they could fend off any attack from hostile tribes. Their fears subsided as they watched the riders draw nearer, unaware of the deadly scheme unfolding against them. Eager to offer their unexpected guests a warm meal, the servants hurried to prepare hot food and drinks. As they rode down the slope toward the camp, John McDaniel turned to de Prefontaine with a growl. "That might not be them," he muttered. "They should have 2 wagons, but I only see 1. "There's only one way to find out," de Prefontaine replied. "Let's ride in and see." Spurring their horses, the men galloped down the hill and into Don Antonio Jose Chavez's camp. The unsuspecting Chavez welcomed the horsemen with open arms, inviting them to dismount and share a meal. But before he could react, he found himself staring down the barrels of rifles and pistols. Without warning, McDaniel's gang had drawn their weapons on him. The bandits demanded his gold and silver, but Chavez denied bringing any from Santa Fe. The outlaws laughed at his claim and wasted no time tearing through the wagon, tossing its contents onto the ground as the helpless Chavez and his wide-eyed servants looked on. Within an hour, the thieves uncovered about $5,000 in gold and silver. Fearful that soldiers from Westport might be trailing them, 7 of the bandits took their share and rode off into the distance, vanishing along Cow Creek. Once away from the camp, they hurriedly buried most of the stolen treasure, planning to return for it when the danger had passed. Then they fled. Meanwhile, the remaining outlaws were determined to find the rest of the loot. For 2 days, they ransacked the camp, while Chavez stubbornly insisted there was no more gold. At last, they discovered it, hidden inside an old trunk that Chavez had carefully concealed. With the treasure now in their possession, the bandits led Chavez away from the road. 4 of them raised their pistols and fired, the bullets tearing into his body and blowing off his head. After looting his pockets for any remaining gold, they tossed his lifeless body into a ravine and shoved the wagon in after it. Rumors soon spread that the wagon still held gold undiscovered by the murderers, its fortune buried beneath the wreckage at the bottom of the ravine. Before fleeing, the outlaws caught one of the mules and loaded some of the stolen gold onto its back. But as they rode off, their luck turned. Riders appeared on the horizon, soldiers galloping hard in pursuit. Slowed down by the burdened mule, the outlaws were forced to stash much of the treasure along the way and flee. 10 of them, including the McDaniel brothers and de Prefontaine, were captured. Justice was swift. John and David McDaniel were sentenced to hang, their necks snapping as they swung from the gallows. De Prefontaine, however, somehow managed to secure a presidential pardon, escaping his fate. The remaining outlaws received long prison sentences. Despite their arrests, most of the treasure was never recovered. When captured, the bandits had only a small portion of gold in their pockets. The story of the robbery spread among Santa Fe travelers, yet accounts of the treasure's final resting place varied wildly. Some insisted it was buried along the banks of the Arkansas River, while others swore it lay near the Little Arkansas River. Why the disagreement? No one could say. The fate of Chavez's 5 servants also remains a mystery. Some speculated that they managed to escape, taking a portion of the stolen gold with them and hiding it before the bandits could claim it. Over the years, countless fortune seekers have scoured the banks of both rivers in search of Chavez's lost treasure. But lesser known, yet equally reliable accounts suggest that the gold was actually hidden near Cow Creek Crossing, west of Lyons. For those still hoping to uncover one of Kansas's richest lost treasures, Cow Creek may hold the key. While the Arkansas and Little Arkansas rivers have drawn treasure hunters for generations, Cow Creek has remained largely overlooked. Perhaps after all these years, the long-forgotten fortune still lies buried there, waiting to be found. The night air was crisp and clear that October evening. At the base of a hill, a lone coyote's howl shattered the silence. From the dense timber along the muddy Verdigris River, 4 miles southeast of Nowata in the Cherokee Nation, an untamed strip of land in what is now northeastern Oklahoma, 5 riders burst into the open. They were the infamous Dalton Gang, Emmett, Bob, and Grat Dalton, along with Dick Broadwell and Bill Powers. Having gathered near Tulsa, some 80 miles to the south, they were en route to Coffeyville. Along the way, they had stopped at familiar hideouts they intended to use again if things went awry in Coffeyville. Their saddlebags sagged under the weight of $9,000 in gold and silver. By the following night, 4 of the gang would be dead, the 5th critically wounded, and their fortune in stolen gold and silver would have disappeared. The outlaws rode in pairs behind their leader, clad in new clothes with coat collars turned up against the biting night air. They were tall, hard-muscled men, each standing over 6 feet. Seated proudly in their ornate Mexican saddles purchased specifically for the bold endeavor ahead, they pressed forward. The early autumn moon bathed the landscape in a soft glow, illuminating deep gullies and sandstone ledges, allowing their fine horses to maintain a swift pace. The men remained silent until they reached a deeply rutted road, carved by the wheels of farmers' buggies and wagons. Here, they turned north toward Coffeyville, Kansas. "Let's keep moving," one of them called out. "Old Man Davis's place is up the road a couple of hours. We can camp there." Spurring their horses into a trot, they pressed forward. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, they reached their destination. They dismounted near a scrub oak thicket on the western bank of Onion Creek, securing their horses before gathering around a small fire for warmth. 2 of the gang rode to a nearby cornfield on the J.F. Savage farm, returning with fresh grain for the horses. As they boiled coffee, the firelight reflected off their finely crafted saddles, adorned with intricate carvings by master artisans from Old Mexico. The silver stirrups glistened in the flickering flames, and behind each saddle was a rolled slicker. Hair-covered saddle pockets, a hallmark of wealthy ranchers from south of the border, bulged with stolen riches loot from recent train and bank robberies across Indian Territory. Before dawn, those saddlebags would be emptied, their contents hidden somewhere along Onion Creek. In the years that followed, treasure hunters would scour the area, drawn by the legend of the gang's lost fortune. Yet, no one would ever find it. The Dalton Gang camped along Onion Creek on October 5, 1892. It would be their final camp. At the time, they were the most notorious outlaws in the West, feared for their brazen train robberies and occasional high-stakes bank heists. The rewards on their heads totaled thousands of dollars, and every lawman in the Southwest recognized their faces. Yet on this night, they were unconcerned about any posse creeping up on them. They were in high spirits, discussing their grand scheme, one destined to be the most daring in Western history. Their plan was unprecedented, robbing 2 banks at the same time. Even the legendary Jesse James had never attempted such a feat. Their targets were the First National Bank and C.M. Condon and Company's Bank in Coffeyville. They laughed as they finalized the details. By the next day, they would be legends one way or another. The operation was meticulously planned. Nothing had been overlooked, especially the escape route in case anything went awry. The hidden caches of money would fund their journey to the Mexican border. They did not anticipate trouble, but if events unfolded as expected, they would make their way to a designated rendezvous where Amos Burton, a black man, waited with a covered wagon. Disguised as women, they would board the wagon, and Burton would drive them south. The gang was aware that the citizens of Coffeyville had been expecting them for weeks. At one point, the town was teeming with lawmen from across Indian Territory. However, the bandits had received word that most marshals had grown weary of waiting and had left. Still, they knew there was always a chance something could go wrong. They did not discount the possibility of a gunfight. If one broke out, any survivors would retreat to their Onion Creek camp, where their hidden funds would secure their escape. Dirt-poor farmers in the area could be bribed to mislead any pursuing posse. Money went a long way in the Indian nations, where a day's wage was merely 50 cents. As the night deepened, the bandits spread their slickers near the fire and settled in for a few hours of sleep. With the first light of dawn, they rekindled the fire and prepared a simple breakfast of coffee, hard-boiled eggs, and fresh biscuits. Afterward, they carefully donned their disguises for their operation in Coffeyville. As the sun rose over the treetops, they saddled their horses. Around them, farm families were already hard at work, having been up since before daylight. As the Daltons mounted their horses, most farm families were sitting down for breakfast. However, a young girl, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. James Brown, had already saddled her mare and left home early. As she approached the wooden bridge spanning Onion Creek, she was startled to see 5 men riding out from beneath it. She stopped, watching as they galloped down the road, kicking up a trail of dust. Noticing their tracks coming from under the bridge, she briefly considered following them but ultimately decided against it. Years later, she would come to realize that had she pursued those tracks while they were fresh, she might have stumbled upon a hidden fortune. Around 9:30 a.m., the bandits rode into Coffeyville from the west. Moving casually through the streets, they halted near the home of Police Judge Munn, where they hitched their horses. Then, they proceeded on foot toward the 2 banks, their coats concealing their firearms. Their disguises were impeccable. No one recognized them. The next 15 minutes would become infamous. In a mere 12 minutes of gunfire, the townspeople, hiding behind whatever cover they could find, engaged in a bloody shootout with the outlaws inside the banks. 3 members of the gang were killed. Emmett Dalton, riddled with 23 bullets, was barely alive. Only Dick Broadwell managed to attempt an escape, but he was gunned down as he rode toward Onion Creek. He clung to his saddle for a quarter of a mile before finally collapsing. His loyal horse stopped and stood watch over his lifeless body. 4 of the gang lay dead, but they had managed to take the lives of 4 citizens and seriously wound 3 others. They had stolen over $20,000, yet every dollar was recovered. When the banks later tallied their funds, they found a slight surplus. Some extra money had apparently spilled from the bandits' pockets and was collected with the loot. Emmett Dalton, gravely wounded, learned of his comrades' fates. Realizing his own life was slipping away, he confessed that the gang had left Tulsa with around $9,000. However, he never disclosed what had become of it. Upon hearing of this sum, one local scoffed, "The Daltons never saw that much money in their damned lives." Many assumed Emmett was exaggerating. But at that moment, as he hovered between life and death, with the rest of his gang already gone, he had no reason to boast. If the money existed, its whereabouts remained a mystery. When the records are checked, there seems little doubt that he spoke the truth. In the few short months before the Coffeyville fiasco, the Daltons had committed robberies netting them well over $20,000. Only recently, they had robbed a Missouri, Kansas, and Texas train near Wagner, Oklahoma, taking $3,000. On July 15, 1892, they had stopped another MK&T train near Adair, taking a large sum that was never officially reported. The companies that were robbed were reluctant to disclose their losses, as admitting to large sums stolen by outlaws was damaging to their reputations. The week after the July 15th robbery, the Daltons strolled into a bank in El Reno, Oklahoma, where they surprised the banker's wife, who was alone at the time. Seeing their guns, she screamed and fainted. The Daltons proceeded to help themselves to more than $17,000, forcing the bank to close. Other smaller robberies were commonplace for the gang, and by the time of the Coffeyville robberies, they had at least $20,000 in their possession. In those days, that was a significant fortune. As far as can be determined, the only extravagant spending the bandits indulged in was on ornate Mexican saddles and a few flashy clothes purchased in the Osage Nation. There is no clear indication of what happened to the remainder of their plunder, aside from the $9,000 they carried with them from Tulsa. Most likely, the rest was buried somewhere between Tulsa and Coffeyville and remains undiscovered. The dead bandits were hastily buried in Elmwood Cemetery in Coffeyville. However, their reported wealth led many citizens to second-guess the official accounts. Rumors circulated that large sums of money had been sewn into the linings of their clothing, and for a time, there was even talk of exhuming the bodies for further inspection. Emmett miraculously survived his wounds and was sentenced to life in prison. However, he was pardoned after 15 years behind bars. Upon his release, he was closely monitored. as many suspected he would attempt to retrieve the hidden caches. Instead, he chose to live an honest and peaceful life. Though he visited the vicinity of Onion Creek, there is no evidence that he ever returned to the site of the buried loot, likely for good reason. He knew that he would be followed or ambushed if he attempted to recover any treasure. Even after 15 years, many Coffeyville citizens still believed any surviving Dalton deserved to be hanged. Most researchers today believe that the largest share of the Dalton loot remains hidden around the Onion Creek camp. Other caches may have been stashed at locations where the gang camped between Tulsa and Coffeyville. It is highly probable that one such camp was a few miles southeast of Nowata, near Lightning Creek, just below the famed Cootie's Bluff. Another potential site could be near the old Coffeyville-Nowata Road on California Creek, north of Nowata. Modern metal detectors could prove invaluable in these areas. With determination and a bit of luck, one of the Dalton's caches might still be uncovered. Without a doubt, relics left by the gang would also be found, and even those would be valuable today. In fact, Dalton relics are now highly sought after by collectors, further fueling interest in the legendary lost loot of the infamous gang.
Once Deputy Wilson had branded him, Starr found that he was unable to find work. Though he had been released following his arrests due to his innocence, Starr was still seen as a bad person because of his brand. He was branded bad before he ever became bad, Oklahoma magistrate Floyd Kimbrough remarked. Desperate to earn a living, Starr confided in his friend Ed Newcomb. "Since everybody thinks I'm a bad bully," he said, "I might as well be one." Thus, they decided to rob the Missouri Pacific Depot at Nowata. On the evening of Friday, May 14, 1892, Starr and Newcomb rode into Nowata and tied their mounts at the rail in front of the depot. "I don't know who was the most scared," Depot Agent Barney Hollenbeck said later, "me or them. But they had the smoke end of their guns looking at me, so I said, 'Boys, don't do anything you can be hung for. I'll get you the money.'" They then went on to rob the Schufelt and Son General Store in Sequoia of $814 before spending the night in a haystack on the XU Ranch near Lenape. The break of dawn revealed the figures riding away from the haystack on the XU Ranch, catching the attention of its owner, Albert Dodge. From the veranda of his house, he peered through his trusty telescope, unmasking the familiar face of Starr. A sense of unease washed over Dodge, convinced that trouble brewed beneath the surface. Why would Starr seek refuge in a haystack when he could have sought shelter in the bunkhouse? Dodge wasted no time in confirming his suspicions, swiftly mounting his horse and venturing into Sequoia. There, he sent a telegram to Deputy Marshal Floyd Wilson, disclosing Starr's direction of escape. Wilson, fueled by the determination to finally apprehend Starr, embarked on his pursuit without hesitation. It was at Wolf Creek where their paths converged. Starr recalled later, "He didn't give me an opportunity to surrender. He simply opened fire, and so did I. We both missed. His firearm jammed, but mine did not. I stood over him, witnessing his last moments, and uttered, 'Mr. Wilson, you have relentlessly pursued me for the final time.' I felt no remorse as he succumbed." From that moment, Starr's fate was sealed. Branded a wanted man, he became both thief and murderer. "I reckoned I had nothing to lose by continuing," he confessed in his memoirs. "That marshal transformed me into an outlaw and a killer." Determined to forge his own path, Starr assembled a gang, knowing that the presence of accomplices couldn't intensify his punishment any further. They became known as the Wild Ones, leaving no stone unturned in their ventures. In the summer of 1893, the Wild Ones wrought havoc, robbing banks, railroad depots, stores, and even a train. From Muskogee to Kansas, their crimes were rampant, leaving behind a trail of destruction. But their numbers dwindled with each robbery, and by the time they hit Aldrich, Missouri, only Starr and John Wilson remained. "Let's quit robbing and do a little hoorayin'," Starr proposed to Wilson. But before they indulged in any revelry, Starr had to stash his ill-gotten gains. He promised to meet Wilson in Colorado Springs after 2 weeks. "I cashed my share of the money we had stolen," Starr later recounted to a Hollywood producer. "But naturally, I ain't saying where it is, except it's near the border in a place nobody could find in a million years." On January 6, 1894, Starr and Wilson reunited at the Antlers Hotel in Colorado Springs, but their freedom was short-lived. In the sweltering summer of '93, the Wild Ones were up to no good. With each robbery, their numbers dwindled until only Starr and John Wilson remained after the Aldrich bank heist. Exhausted and rich, Starr suggested they retire and celebrate their success, but fate had other plans. The next day, they were whooping some whiskey at the hotel's bar when a detective barged in with a double-barrel 10-gauge shotgun. Nobody dared to move. It remains a mystery how that detective tracked them down in Colorado Springs. Starr's secret stash of loot was discovered, and they were taken back to Oklahoma in cuffs and leg irons. The infamous hanging Judge Parker sentenced Wilson to 25 years for armed robbery. Starr was sentenced to death for the murder of Marshall. The autumn of 1895 brought the second trial for Starr, who had been languishing in jail since his previous conviction. Despite his bleak circumstances, Starr found solace in his thoughts of the riches his crimes had earned him. However, the outcome of the trial was the same, a sentence of death by hanging. But once again, Starr's legal team managed to secure an appeal. Eventually, Starr was found guilty of manslaughter and robbery and sent to Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus. During his time in prison, aided by newspaper writers Louis Stover and Oliver Combs, Starr told his life story, but each writer's version differed in important details. Nevertheless, Starr's sensational story captured the public's imagination. In 1902, the Cherokee Council petitioned President Theodore Roosevelt to pardon Starr, and Roosevelt granted the pardon in June 1903. According to Starr's own account, he went to Kansas and took some money from his cash. In the quaint town of Tulsa, Starr settled down on a farm after tying the knot. He was determined to lead a life of honesty, but the world had other plans for him. An old robbery charge caught up with him and he was dragged to Arkansas. To hell with trying to be an honest person, he thought after his escape. His partner in crime, John Wilson, had just been released from prison, and together they robbed several banks. Wilson had enough cash to live an honest life and changed his name, but Starr wasn't so lucky. He was caught again and imprisoned until 1913. After his release, he teamed up with Louis Estes and they robbed 14 banks in Oklahoma, filling Starr's coffers to the brim. In the spring of 1915, Starr's gang grew to 6 members, earning themselves the grand title of the Great American Bank Robbers. However, they failed to live up to their lofty name. Their initial heist at the State Bank in Stroud, Oklahoma was a calamity. During the chaos, a brave 17-year-old Paul Curry, armed with a hog-killing rifle from the neighboring butcher shop, managed to wound Starr. In retaliation, the bandits mercilessly shot and killed Curry before fleeing, leaving behind Starr and the bank's ill-gotten gains stuffed hastily into canvas sacks. This time, Starr found himself sentenced to 4 years in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. In 1919, after his release on parole, he penned his memoirs for the Wichita Eagle and even portrayed himself in the motion picture, A Debtor to the Law. Historian Rivers, a fellow Cherokee, mused that had Starr retired after his cinematic portrayal, he might have become a legendary figure in American folklore, an emblem of injustice and an indomitable spirit. Yet, for reasons known only to Starr, he embarked on another audacious venture. With 3 companions and an automobile in place of trusty steeds, they journeyed to Harrison, Arkansas, setting their sights on the People's National Bank. With a commanding voice, Starr demanded, "Hands up and not a sound." Unbeknownst to him, a customer named W.J. Myers had swiftly snatched a rifle discreetly kept by the bank. In a moment of sheer bravery, Myers shot Starr in the left flank. The other criminals fled, leaving the bank's spoils behind, and ultimately evaded capture. Starr's life flickered away 2 hours later, but not before uttering his final words. "I am the wealthiest outlaw in the entire nation, and no one shall ever discover my hidden fortune." Despite the pleas of doctors, who desperately sought the location of his secret stash, Starr's response was a defiant and incomplete dismissal. "He began to rebuff us," recalled Dr. Roy Struthers, but his breath left him before he could finish the sentence.
Midwesterners often lament that the gold rush largely bypassed their region when it comes to ghost towns and buried treasures. While there may not have been a concentrated rush of miners in the Midwest, much of the gold from that era was hidden along the way home, sometimes thousands of miles from where it was originally mined. One of the most promising places for treasure hunting in the Midwest is northeastern Kansas. Not only does this location offer an excellent chance to uncover a treasure estimated at around $50,000, but it also presents opportunities to discover valuable pre-Civil War relics. The tale is well documented, and while a map exists, if it hasn't been lost or deliberately hidden, the location itself is relatively easy to pinpoint. The most intriguing aspect of this story is that, as far as research indicates, no serious search has ever been conducted at the site. No advanced metal detectors have been used there, meaning the treasure, consisting of 2 bags of gold buried in a metal can, should be relatively easy to locate with modern equipment. This legend dates back to 1850, when 2 young men from Boston were captivated by news of the California gold rush. Pooling their savings, they booked passage on a steamer and journeyed around the tip of South America to reach the goldfields. Arriving in California in 1851, weary and nearly broke, they joined the rush to the Feather River diggings. Fortune favored them, and before long, they staked a valuable claim, which they worked for nearly 2 years. Living frugally, they managed to save most of their earnings. By the time their gold stash surpassed 100 pounds, they began planning their return to Boston to start a business, confident they now had enough capital. Their journey to California had been long and perilous, and after experiencing the hazards of sea travel, they had no desire to return by water. The voyage was not only dangerous, but also rife with the risk of robbery, leaving them vulnerable with little recourse. Given the immense value of their gold, they felt they could better protect their fortune by traveling overland. By then, the trails had improved significantly, and large groups regularly made the journey, offering some degree of safety. After selling their claim and mining tools, they used the proceeds to buy supplies and a wagon. To conceal their gold, they stored most of the nearly pure ore in small buckskin bags, which they then hid inside a gunpowder keg. With everything in place, they joined a wagon train of other fortune seekers heading back east. Their journey home began in early 1854, a time when travel across the vast deserts was relatively safe. The group didn't follow a single major overland trail, but made good progress nonetheless. However, despite the speed of their travel and the safety in numbers, something about their companions unsettled the 2 Bostonians. The men they had joined were rough, hard-living ex-miners, very different from the company they had kept in California. Each night, these men drank heavily and gambled relentlessly. While the Bostonians had no issues with them during the day, the nightly revelry was something they couldn't bring themselves to participate in. As they refrained from drinking and gambling, the partners gradually became outsiders within the group. Their refusal to join in made them the subject of ridicule, and soon, the other men began eyeing them with suspicion. Some, having lost money in gambling, turned their attention toward the 2 quiet travelers, particularly to the gold they had carefully guarded. By the time the travelers reached Julesburg, Colorado, tensions had escalated into open hostility. The 2 Bostonians found themselves isolated, with the rest of the group turning against them. Although they continued to work together during the day, every evening brought fresh arguments and increasing animosity. Upon arriving in Julesburg, the wagon train decided to rest for a few days, giving their animals time to recover and allowing the travelers to indulge in the town's rougher diversions. It was during this layover that the 2 partners came to a stark realization. Facing the dangers of hostile Indians and the unpredictability of the trail alone seemed far safer than staying with their increasingly hostile companions. One night, while the others were in town, the 2 men quietly hitched their wagon and slipped away. They traveled through the night and into the next day, determined to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the wagon train. For weeks they journeyed near the Kansas-Nebraska border, encountering neither hostile tribes nor any significant trouble. As they neared the Missouri border, they found a well-traveled path that connected to the Oregon Trail. Eventually, they reached a ford on the Nemaha River in what is now Nemaha County, Kansas. Deciding to rest for the night, they camped near the river and planned to visit a nearby settlement called Richmond. At the time, Richmond was known as a good place to resupply, but it also had a reputation for being rough and lawless. Now deeply suspicious of everyone they encountered, the two men decided to bury their gold before venturing into town. They carefully rolled the gunpowder keg off their wagon and selected a discreet spot near their campsite. With no need to rush, they dug an exceptionally deep hole, ensuring the ground was firmly packed when they refilled it. To further conceal their efforts, they scattered debris, planted a small bush over the site, and camouflaged the area with leaves and stones. To any outsider, there was no indication that the earth had been disturbed. Feeling secure in their precautions, they made their way into Richmond. However, as soon as they entered the general store, they were met with an alarming sight. One of the men from the wagon train they had abandoned in Julesburg was standing at the counter purchasing ammunition. It was a shocking revelation. Unbeknownst to them, the wagon train, led by experienced frontiersmen, had taken a more direct route and arrived in Richmond at least 2 days earlier. Meanwhile, the two Bostonians had unknowingly lost time by meandering along lesser-known trails. During this era, those traveling with a wagon train were required to sign a pact agreeing to remain with the group. Abandoning the train mid-journey was considered a serious violation of that agreement, something the two men were undeniably guilty of. Word of their arrival spread rapidly, reaching the town's makeshift saloon in mere moments. Fueled by alcohol and resentment, their former travel companions were already in a foul mood. Upon hearing that the deserters were in town, they immediately set out to confront them, determined to settle the score once and for all. Tensions in Richmond quickly escalated into violence. Heated words turned into shoving, and then someone drew a gun. Several shots rang out, and one of the Bostonians collapsed onto the hard ground. A bullet had struck him in the head, and there was no doubt he was dead. His partner wasted no time arguing further. He knew his friend was gone, and that his own life was now in grave danger. While the drunken mob gathered around the fallen man, he sprinted to his wagon, seized the reins, and drove his team into a wild frenzy. But he didn't turn back toward the river ford. Instead, he fled straight east, racing toward the city of St. Joseph, Missouri. Upon arrival, he sold the wagon, the team, and the remaining tools before booking passage back to Boston. He had no intention of returning for the gold, at least not while there was a chance that the others from the wagon train were still out there, still angry, and still capable of killing him. Back in Boston, he never forgot about the treasure. He always intended to return, but life had other plans. He married, had 2 sons, and settled into the responsibilities of family life. Then, 6 years later, the Civil War broke out. He enlisted, and his regiment was among the first to see combat. Before a month had passed, he was dead killed in battle. Yet even in the face of war, he had not abandoned his dream of recovering the gold. Aware of the dangers ahead, he had carefully drawn a detailed map of the site, marking exactly where he and his partner had buried the treasure. Before leaving for battle, he entrusted the map to his wife, instructing her to pass it down to their sons if he did not return. In the years that followed, Richmond vanished, and a larger town, Seneca, developed about 2 miles south of the old river ford. While the shooting remained a part of local legend, no one in town knew about the hidden treasure. That changed around 1900, when 2 men arrived in Seneca and began asking cautious questions about the old ford, the wagon trails, and most curiously, the long-forgotten murder. They claimed to be nephews of the slain man and recounted their father's version of the story, which closely matched the events detailed here. More than 40 years had passed, and few people in Seneca could recall the incident. Those who did remembered only that a shooting had occurred. The reasons behind it had faded into obscurity. The brothers were taken to the old ford, where they spent considerable time searching. Then, without explanation, they returned home to Boston and were never seen in Seneca again. Had the story of the treasure faded into history with them? Perhaps, but in 1905, a man named Ripley arrived in Seneca, carrying a map. Convinced of its authenticity, he enlisted several locals to help him search. They spent an entire summer combing the area but found nothing. Before leaving, Ripley explained that he had purchased the map from the family of the Bostonian Sons. Being an old friend, he had complete confidence in its legitimacy. However, more than half a century had passed since 1854, and the landscape had changed drastically. Many of the landmarks marked on the map were gone, and since the original sketch had been drawn from memory, even the smallest miscalculation could mean the difference between finding the gold and digging in the wrong place. Since the early 1900s, no serious effort has been made to recover the treasure, at least none that has been publicly recorded. Yet, the story continues to be told around Seneca. Small boys still roam the fields, digging and dreaming of lost gold, though no discoveries have ever been reported. This remains one of the most promising treasure hunts in the Midwest. The facts are well documented in local newspapers and county records. While the land is likely private property now, a fair share of the recovery would likely open gates to any determined hunter. Beyond the gold itself, an expert metal detector operator would almost certainly uncover relics from the old trail days. The Nemaha River Ford was a well-traveled crossing before the Civil War, making it highly likely that items were dropped, lost, or discarded there. Small treasures like these could help fund a search, and there's no doubt that plenty remain buried beneath the Kansas soil, waiting to be found.
In the enchanting world of the 1880s, a whimsical Englishman named Edward Turnley, blessed with both opulence and a taste for revelry, found himself immersed in a cozy pub indulging in frothy ales. As the sixth pint coursed through his veins, a fantastical notion took hold of his mind, igniting a fervent desire for both wealth and merriment. A few sunsets later, he embarked on a voyage to the distant shores of America, traversing the untamed frontiers until he reached the nascent state of Kansas. There, amidst the arid plains of Harper County, he acquired 1,700 vast acres of desolate land plagued by prickly cockleburs. The price he paid, $1.50 per acre, was no trifling sum in those bygone days. Little did Turnley fathom this was the genesis of a most peculiar treasure trove, harboring around $1,000 in molten gold, a fortune that would appreciate manifold in present times. With his land secured, Turnley fashioned a ramshackle abode, which he whimsically christened the Ranch House, in grand moments of self-importance. Through missives and newspaper proclamations dispatched across the English shores, he declared himself the sole proprietor of a township christened Runnymede. For a princely sum of $500 per head, he extended an offer to the sons of affluent and titled Englishmen, promising them a comfortable settlement in the bosom of Runnymede. Within those hallowed grounds, Turnley pledged to instruct these young scions in the art of prosperous farming, teaching them the secrets of cultivating bountiful gardens and the intricacies of cattle husbandry. He assured their education would not be forsaken, vowing that they would soon blossom into formidable physical specimens. At the culmination of a year, these sons would return to England as well-rounded gentlemen, aflame with an ardent pursuit of vast fortunes, armed with their newly acquired wisdom. The promoter also noted it would be an extraordinary chance for young women to come to America, though he was not explicit about just what opportunities awaited them in Runnymede. Hundreds of young Englishmen arrived, each with hundreds of dollars in gold for spending money. They needed it, for soon large numbers of girls from England showed up at Runnymede, and they weren't interested in learning how to farm. Frame houses and porched stores were built. Soon, Runnymede had the reputation of being the roaringest town in Kansas. Gold, specie, and silver was spent like water, with fortunes changing hands nightly on the turn of a card or the flip of a coin. Great freight wagons rumbled through the cobbled streets each week, carrying barrels of fine whiskey, which flowed freely at never-ending revelries. The air was thick with excitement as steeple-chasing races and grand boxing matches captivated the hearts of all, their outcomes wagered upon with fervor. One of the young Englishmen, blessed with a handsome inheritance of $15,000, embarked on a whirlwind of merriment, financing a spree that the town would never forget. As the year drew to a close, news arrived from across the sea, urging the Englishmen to return to their homeland. Among them was a youthful gentleman, now adorned with a noble title and blessed with considerable property, who received a farewell gift of $1,000 in shimmering gold and silver. With his precious fortune safely tucked into a satchel, he joined his comrades in one final night of revelry. Under the moonlit sky, as the intoxicating spirits coursed through his veins, exhaustion overcame him. Driven by a heavy slumber, he stumbled away from the dance, clutching his satchel and sought refuge in a weathered barn. Weary, he ascended to the loft and surrendered to the embrace of sleep. But fate had a cruel twist in store. In the dead of night, the barn became a raging inferno, devouring the structure with insatiable hunger. Within a mere hour, the flames reduced the once sturdy haven to smoldering ruins. The inhabitants of Runnymede, armed with long-handled rakes, rallied together, tirelessly sifting through the debris in search of the Englishman's lifeless body and the gleaming treasure he carried within his satchel. Charred pieces of the body were raked out of the ashes and rubble. Piece by piece, they were collected. They were carried to a fresh-dug grave, dropped in and covered. For a short time, men and women raked the ruins, seeking to uncover some of the gold specie. They failed. Most believe it melted during the fire and was buried by the constant raking. Shortly after, Runnymede folded up. It had existed but a few short years. Many years later, an Englishman recalled the town. The place was located about 12 miles northwest of the town of Harper. The grave was never marked, but it was close by the barn, he said. It is doubtful if ever modern-day metal detectors have searched for this little-known trove. A treasure hunter who was persistent might well uncover it, as well as other caches or lost coins from an earlier day.
Kansas, land of waving grass, red earth, and wide skies. But beneath those windswept plains, the soil holds more than just roots and stone. It holds secrets, some old, some deadly, and some still waiting to be dug up. In this episode, we'll be riding alongside three of the most tantalizing treasure legends ever to come out of the Sunflower State. Tales soaked in blood, ambition, and gold that never made it home. First, we'll visit the shadowy corners of Galena, where a hard-faced woman known as Ma Stafleback once ruled with a grip of iron and left behind a whispered hoard that's never been found. Then we'll follow the ruts of the old Santa Fe Trail, where a doomed caravan and a Mexican freighter named Martinez vanished in a blaze of violence and left silver dollars scattered in the dust. And finally, we'll circle back to the banks of Cow Creek, near Lyons, where a chilling robbery in 1843 left a U.S. Army payroll missing and a man named de Prefontaine buried under a cloud of suspicion. That gold and silver still hasn't come to light and might just be waiting for the right hands to find it. These are not just campfire yarns. They're stitched into the rough fabric of frontier history, recorded in weathered journals and passed down in half-remembered whispers. So settle in and keep your spade handy, because you're about to hear three true tales of Kansas treasure still lost. There was a time before the 20th century rolled in when a 15-foot board fence stood guard like a silent sentinel over a grim huddle of stone buildings just outside the main walls of the state penitentiary in Lansing, Kansas. That fence wasn't put up for decoration. It kept watch over the women's prison, a place as dreary and joyless as a prairie winter. The women folk locked away in that stony hive lived like shadows. Their cells, built from native stone, had slits for windows that barely let in enough air to keep a candle alive, let alone a soul. From first light to dusk, the women bent their backs over boiling tubs and scalding suds, their hands raw from lye soap and endless toil. A newspaper man who did time there in 1887 said it plain. For these inmates, the week consists of one continual round of labor, and no one doubted him. In the year 1897, a woman from Galena, Kansas, joined that cheerless little colony. Her name was Stafleback, Ma Stafleback, and she wasn't some pickpocket or chicken thief. She was locked up for a mess of killings. Some said a dozen, some said more. Her victims were mostly well-heeled lead miners, mine owners, and silver-tongued investors who came to Galena chasing fortune and never left. They were drawn in like moths to flame, and Ma, well, she was the fire. During her trial, Ma clamped her jaws tight. She didn't say a word about the treasure, just clammed up like a snapping turtle. But everyone knew she and her 3 sons had taken rich pickings off their victims, and the hoard was never found. The courts might have taken her freedom, but she took the secret with her. Now, Kansas prison officials weren't fools. They figured time would wear her down. That stone house of sorrow was hotter than a branding iron in summer, and colder than the devil's handshake in winter. So they waited. "She'll talk," they said. They all do. But Ma wasn't like the rest. She held fast for 25 years, until March of 1909, when word came down like a hammer strike. Ma Stafleback is dead. And she hadn't spilled a single word about that treasure. Warden Haskell muttered what many already figured. She took her secrets to hell with her. Since then, many a treasure hunter has come sniffing around Galena, hoping to dig up a gold coin or a fancy ring. But all they've turned up are old bones, the poor fellas Ma and her boys tossed away like broken tools. Now, I don't deal in fairy tales, and I won't tell you Ma didn't stash away a mighty fortune. She surely did. That woman got rich the crooked way, starting in the booming days of Galena when lead was flowing like spring water, and miners walked around with silver in their pockets and whiskey on their breath. It was a time when even a poor plowman could turn over a rock and find himself a vein of wealth. Folks said you could yank a weed from the dirt and find ore glinting beneath it. Men who came west with nothing but calluses and dreams were millionaires by sundown, and in that fevered rush for riches, Ma saw her opening. She didn't stake a claim like the others. No, she opened a boarding house, only it wasn't just meals and beds she was offering. She brought in a few hard-faced, sharp-eyed women who knew how to smile just right and talk a man into staying the night. But Ma wasn't content with coins on the pillow, she wanted it all. So she borrowed a page from the Bloody Benders, a clan of killers who ran an inn not too far away, and made a habit of murdering travelers and taking their gold. Ma added a twist: get the miners drunk, tempt them with promises, and then have one of her sons sneak up behind with an axe and settle things for good. Once the killing was done, they hauled the bodies off in wagons and dropped them down into old mine shafts. Wet, deep, and forgotten by all but the ghosts. Ma kept her books neat and her manner modest. She'd haggle over pennies at the grocer's and grumble, "Lands of Goshens, I don't know where the money goes." All the while, bodies kept disappearing. But no one thought twice. Men came and went in mining towns, fortunes rose and fell like prairie storms. Then Ma's luck ran thin. One of her girls got mad, maybe over a cut of the profits, maybe over a man, and went to the law. Soon enough, Ma and her boys were in shackles. They searched that house from cellar to rafters, but found little more than trinkets. The treasure was gone, vanished like mist at dawn. Since that day, folks have scoured the old shafts, draining water, poking into the dark, hoping for the gleam of gold. They found bones, sure enough, but never Ma's stash. Now here's where I'll offer you a bit of cowboy common sense. Ma Stafleback wasn't a fool. She planned for trouble. You really think she'd dump her gold down a shaft she couldn't reach in a hurry? Not likely. My bet is she buried it in plain earth under a bluff near a tree beside a boulder that looked like any other, something she could get to in a flash, if she had to run. If you're hunting that loot, don't waste your time with soggy holes in the ground. Grab yourself a metal detector and start walking those fields. Somewhere out there in the red dirt of Kansas, Ma's treasure still waits. And if you find it, well, just mind who's watching. Ma may be long gone, but a secret that dark might still have teeth. They say the plains around Dodge City, Kansas, flat and wind-scoured as a griddle, hold more than buffalo grass and ghost stories. Somewhere out there, not far from the Point of Rocks, lies a cache of Spanish silver hidden deep in the dust of the old Santa Fe Trail. Now, the Santa Fe Trail was no ordinary wagon road. It stretched like a taut rawhide strap from the Missouri River, clear down to the sunburnt adobe walls of Santa Fe, New Mexico. In 1853, long before Dodge became the byword of the buffalo trade and cowtown lawlessness, a freight caravan set out from New Mexico, heading east for Independence, Missouri. This train had rolled north from Old Mexico and was captained by an old trail hand named Jesus M. Martinez, a man seasoned by sun, saddle, and hard luck. The wagons rumbled as far as a little rise of land west of what would one day be Dodge. There, with their oxen tired and fires kindled low, the Mexican freighters made their last camp. It was late evening when the watchers caught sight of movement on the plains. The camp stiffened like a snake sensing a footfall. By dawn, fear had shape. Comanche warriors came down on them like a prairie fire. For 5 days, the two sides clawed at each other across the flatland. Ammunition grew scarce, and water scarcer. When the final charge came, it left the freighters butchered and broken, all but Martinez. Somehow the old man survived, maybe knocked cold and passed over for dead, maybe just too tough to kill. When he rose from the dust, sun-maddened and staggering, he found the camp torn to shreds. The warriors had taken what they wanted, torched the wagons, and vanished into the plains. Martinez remembered something the Comanches had overlooked: 21 bags, each packed tight with silver Spanish dollars, hidden in one of the wagons. 1,000 coins to the sack. With no one left to share it and no hope of carrying it, Martinez did what men have always done with riches they couldn't keep. He buried it. Somewhere near the Point of Rocks, a spot that once marked the edge of Mexico itself, he scratched out a grave for his treasure. Then he did the impossible. He made it back to Mexico. But the desert and grief had taken their toll. On his deathbed, he whispered the tale to his son, painting in the air the spot where silver lay sleeping beneath Kansas clay. That son later rode north with companions, hearts full of hope and saddlebags full of sharpened iron rods. They found the old camp, bones bleached and memories long scattered. But the treasure eluded them, as it has everyone since. By the time Dodge City grew up around buffalo hides and barroom shootouts, folks already whispered about the buried silver. In 1877, someone posted a warning in the Dodge City Times, telling would-be diggers to stay off the Morris Collar farm near Point of Rocks. That was 24 years after the massacre, but curiosity dies slow on the prairie. Robert M. Wright, one of Dodge's old buffalo men, swore in print that the hoard still lay near Point of Rocks. And maybe it does. Modern folk with gadgets and metal detectors have an edge on the sharpened rods of old, but silver that slept under prairie grass this long doesn't give itself up easy. And as every plainsman knows, sometimes the chase is the real treasure. Of all the old tales buried in the prairie dust of Kansas, none carries quite the same weight of gold and blood as the story of Joseph R. de Prefontaine, a name that, on paper, bore no more menace than a man selling lace in St. Louis. Yet behind that French-sounding name lay a trail of smoke and gunpowder, ending in one of the most baffling lost treasures to ever vanish beneath the buffalo grass near Lyons. De Prefontaine was a man of contradictions. The early records, what little remains, paint him as a family man, even respectable. In a year's time, the shopkeepers of Missouri tallied up his purchases: a pair of men's shoes, a pair for a woman, boots, and no fewer than 6 pairs of children's shoes. But shoes don't always tell the road a man's heart is traveling. He came to St. Louis in the 1830s, just a pup in his 20s, fresh-faced and itching for a piece of fortune. He found work at a theater, a fancy place with red velvet chairs and cultured folk quoting Shakespeare. But the playhouse had a saloon, and that was the true stage where de Prefontaine performed. Culture didn't hold a candle to whiskey and wild talk. One night during a highbrow performance of Hamlet, de Prefontaine, full to the gills with liquor, mounted a saloon table and bellowed out his own version of the Prince of Denmark's woes, mixed with jokes about St. Louis manners. The drunks roared with laughter. The theater folks did not. A posse of cigar-chomping gentlemen dragged him out by the collar and promised that next time they'd trade words for bullets. That was the end of de Prefontaine Street, Louis chapter. Out west he went, to Westport, Missouri, where the Santa Fe Trail began. Here the air smelled of oxen's sweat, wood smoke, and the promise of gold. He holed up at Yoakum's Tavern, where news flowed as fast as whiskey. It wasn't long before he caught wind of something big: a Mexican caravan rolling out of Santa Fe with $12,000 in gold and silver, and not a guard in sight. Its owner was none other than Don Antonio Jose Chavez, a man whose name carried weight clear back to when Santa Fe was ruled by governors with powdered wigs and family honor. Chavez set out with 5 servants and 55 mules, bound for Westport. But he couldn't outpace the frost. A cruel Kansas spring knifed into the caravan. Mules dropped, frostbitten fingers froze around rifle barrels, and wagons got abandoned. Still, Chavez pressed on. Word of this rich but ragged caravan reached de Prefontaine in the smoky dark of Yoakum's tavern. He wasn't alone at the table. A pair of Texas ne'er-do-wells, Jack and David McDaniel, had their own ideas about how best to liberate that gold. They passed themselves off as captains with orders to raid Mexican trains. More likely, they were outlaws with the scent of silver in their nostrils. By midnight, they had a gang of 15 rough men ready to ride. They caught up with Chavez on Cow Creek, a lonely stream west of what would one day be Lyons. The Mexican trader had made camp, thinking the worst was behind him. When he saw horsemen on the rise, he even told his men to cook extra food for the visitors. De Prefontaine and the McDaniels rode in smiling. Then they drew pistols. What followed was part robbery, part butchery. The first haul, around $35,000 in coins, was found quickly. 7 of the bandits, spooked by the possibility of cavalry hot on their heels, vanished into the prairie with their take. Most believe they buried it along Cow Creek in haste, hoping to return. But the gold fever wasn't cured. The rest of the gang stayed behind, convinced there was more. For 2 days they hounded Chavez, turning over wagon planks and trunks. Eventually, they found another stash. What they did next ended any chance of mercy. 4 of the men dragged Chavez away from camp and gunned him down. Then they dumped his body into a ravine and rolled his wagon in after him. Some say there was still more gold in that wagon, still there when it was buried under grass and thyme. Before long, soldiers caught up with the gang. 10 were arrested, including de Prefontaine and the McDaniels. The brothers swung from the gallows. De Prefontaine, by some miracle or well-placed bribe, wriggled out of the noose with a presidential pardon. The rest went to prison. Of the treasure, little was ever recovered. Maybe the gold is still out there, buried near Cow Creek under centuries of mud, root, and prairie hush. Trouble is, most treasure hunters, lured by confusing tales and second-hand maps, spent decades poking around the Arkansas and Little Arkansas rivers. They might as well have been digging in the moon. But the old-timers who followed the trail, and the records that slipped through the cracks of history, all whisper the same name: Cow Creek. If a man were to find that gold today, it'd be worth more than dollars and cents. It'd be a piece of living history, a hard-earned relic of greed, cold blood, and the kind of Wild West tale that doesn't end with justice but with silence. And somewhere in some forgotten cemetery, the bones of Joseph R. de Prefontaine might still be rattling in protest.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.